In episode 5 of RWBY Volume 7, the third maiden made her appearance in the RWBY series. We were introduced to the current Winter Maiden, Freya, who's an elderly woman very close to death, possibly only a couple days away from it. So it's very likely that within the next couple episodes, or at the very least within this volume, the Winter Maiden powers will be shifting to a new host. So I think we should talk about who those potential hosts might be, and there are a few options for it. The most obvious of which, of course, being Winter Schnee, the person handpicked by General Ironwood to inherit the Winter Maiden powers. Ever since the fall of Beacon Academy, or at least very close to, the only person Freya has been allowed to see is Winter. So it's very likely that if Freya was to pass on naturally, the last person in her thoughts would be the only person she's been allowed to see for months on end. So it seems likely that if things were to progress that way, Winter would inherit the powers. However, I don't think she's actually going to inherit them. That would be very easy for the way that the RWBY series tends to go. You know, things don't go that easy for our protagonists. Not to mention, I think the writers of RWBY are trying to subvert our expectations with having Winter inherit the Winter Maiden powers. You know, they already did Cinder Fall having the Fall Maiden powers, so I think they're trying to make us expect that and then do something completely different. Not to mention that during the conversation between Weiss and Winter, where we found out that Winter was to inherit the Winter Maiden powers, there was a certain word that was mentioned that carries a little bit of a heavy weight in the RWBY series. Weiss said to Winter that her destiny was laid out for her. Of course, Winter responded with, "This is what she is now choosing. It has nothing to do with the general or her family," but when destiny is referred to a person who is set to inherit maiden powers, that seems a bit of a taboo in the RWBY series. We saw what happened in Volume 3 with Pyrrha being destined to inherit the Fall Maiden powers. That did not go very well. So I think that if Winter was to inherit the Winter Maiden powers, it wouldn't last very long. Again, though, it could be that the writers of RWBY are trying to subvert our expectations by dropping this very obvious death flag for Winter by mentioning destiny. It could be that Winter could inherit the Winter Maiden powers and end up surviving, which I really hope that Winter survives, whether she inherits the powers or not, because we've only seen Winter in Volume 3 and Volume 7, as well as a trailer for Volume 4, but we haven't seen much of her character. She still has a lot more that we can explore with her and Weiss, as well as the rest of the Schnee family, who we have yet to see the entirety of the Schnee family, so there's a lot that still needs to be explored. Now, if Winter was to inherit the Winter Maiden powers and was to promptly be killed off, it would, I gotta say, it would leave a very lasting impact on us, the viewers, as well as Weiss within the series. Possibly also other members of the Schnee family, but it could also mean that the powers, if Winter was to have them, would likely be passed to Weiss, who seems to be also the next obvious choice for who would inherit the Winter Maiden powers upon Freya passing away. At least with the way that the RWBY series is set up. Not only would, if Winter got the Winter Maiden powers and then passed on, would pass them to Weiss, it would also be possible because currently the only two prominent young females in the RWBY series, or at least in our main protagonist group, who know who Freya is and where she's located are Weiss and Winter. So if the facility ends up being attacked and they need to move Freya somewhere else to get her to safety, and for some reason Winter's not able to make it there, she might tell Weiss to go and make sure Freya's okay. If Weiss encounters Freya and helps her get wherever, if Freya can even be moved at that point, because she is in a hospital bed and doesn't seem like she can get up that easily, then Freya, seeing this one other person who she hasn't seen anyone else in like months, would probably leave a lasting impact. So if something was to happen to her, the last person that she's imagining as she's passing away could be Weiss. Now, I do kind of like the idea of Weiss becoming a Winter Maiden. However, I don't know if the series is actually going to go towards the route that all of Team RWBY is going to get all of the Maiden powers. So I kind of have a feeling that Winter and Weiss are not going to inherit the Maiden powers. But they aren't the only options in the main protagonist group for those who could inherit the Winter Maiden powers. There is one other. One, Nora Valkyrie, and this is due to her character origins, where she gets her inspiration from. Nora Valkyrie is derived from Norse mythology, loosely based on Thor, as well as her last name Valkyrie. You know, Valkyries are a very prominent thing in Norse mythology. And Freya it's possible that she might be getting her name from the Norse god Freya. So it seems like there might be some connection here. Not to mention, the voice actor for Nora, Samantha Ireland, she kind of hinted that we might be getting a bit of Nora backstory this volume. So this might reveal the connection between Nora and Freya. Whether they are related by blood, whether Freya is the mother or grandmother to Nora, or whether they just grew up together, or something that connects them in a strong enough way that Freya might think of Nora, that would be an interesting connection based on their character origins. Not to mention, there's also a story in Norse mythology that would tie in very well with this. At one point, Thor had to dress up as Freya, or at least impersonate her, to accomplish a certain goal. So if Nora ends up inheriting the Winter Maiden powers, she would be inheriting or impersonating Freya's current position. So that would tie in very nicely. And I would like to see Nora inherit the powers, become a much more prominent character. I know Juniper is pretty prominent currently, but it would be nice to see, you know, Ozpin's faction, or at least our heroes, have a maiden on their side. Currently, Salem's faction has a maiden. Raven's a bit of a wild card, so one maiden on RWBY's side would be kind of nice. However, this would also make Nora a very prominent target in Cinder and Salem's eyes, as, you know, there is the Juniper death theory that is constantly out there that this may not bode that well for them. However, if any of our protagonists inherit the Winter Maiden powers, hopefully they'll be able to keep it, hopefully they'll be able to fend off Cinder's advances and Salem's advances towards them, etc. And we'll see how it plays out. I really do want Nora's backstory, though, because we need to find more about her character, and, you know, hopefully Nora will survive, because there's certain relationships that need to develop in the RWBY series with her involved. But, as I mentioned, there are people targeting the Winter Maiden, and we can't rule them out as possibilities for getting the Maiden powers either. Now, Salem herself is definitely targeting the Winter Maiden, though I don't know if she's actually capable of inheriting the powers. But there is one person on Salem's faction side very hungry to gain more power. That, of course, being Cinder Fall. We saw how she inherited the Winter or the Fall Maiden's powers by any means necessary, sacrificing all of Beacon and Vale to do so. So, yeah, you know, she definitely wants the power, and we saw that she still wants even more power when she attacked Raven and started leeching the power from her. In fact, I think Cinder did get a small portion of the Spring Maiden's power, but upon finding out about the Winter Maiden and where the Winter Maiden's located, Cinder's not going to hesitate to go for that power. Unless, of course, she's distracted by trying to take out RWBY. But Cinder is definitely one option for inheriting the Winter Maiden's powers. Now, we also need to bring up that in RWBY Chibi Season 3, they had put in certain hints as to things to come in the RWBY series. The most prominent of which, of course, being the finale of Volume 6, where the giant Leviathan came to be, and RWBY, using her silver eyes against it, was hinted at very prominently in an episode of RWBY Chibi. Now, in a different episode of RWBY Chibi, Cinder had a certain dream about her inheriting the Winter Maiden's powers, or at least her seeing, oh, this is where the Winter Maiden's located, and going to target that person. She didn't end up getting the Winter Maiden powers, however, as the current Winter Maiden in that dream was, well, a snowman, but a snowman dressed up like Neo. That might be a hint that Neo might become the Winter Maiden, and that would be something I would absolutely love to see. Now, Neo currently is aligned with Cinder, who's aligned with Salem's forces, but I don't see Neo staying with Cinder. And I really don't see the writers killing off Neo. That would create a huge uproar from the fandom. But if Neo was to become a maiden and then break away from Salem's faction, whether she becomes a third party like Raven, a different wild card, or maybe join Ozpin's faction. I don't necessarily see that happening, though it would be amazing if she did. If Neo became a maiden, I would love that. If I got to choose, I would hope that Neo inherits it, that she doesn't do anything more to help Salem's faction, and see how it progresses from there. But just based on what RWBY Chibi might be hinting at, Neo is a possibility. But we have Cinder, who's currently targeting the Maiden, Winter, who is set to inherit the Maiden powers currently, Weiss being the only other prominent female who knows who and where the Winter Maiden is, and then Nora possibly being tied to the Winter Maiden based on her character origins. So there's a few different options available for who could become the Winter Maiden. Possibly even someone that we haven't considered, someone that we haven't even met in the RWBY series. We don't know Freya's history. Hopefully we'll get Nora's backstory that shows a bit of Freya's history, I should be saying. But beyond that, we don't exactly know what is going to happen in Volume 7. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Who do you think is going to inherit the Winter Maiden powers? Who would you like to inherit the Winter Maiden's powers? Do you think it's a different character other than the ones I mentioned in this video? Or do you think that it will be one of the ones that I mentioned? Possibly even someone that we haven't met in the RWBY series. I'm really interested to know what you guys think. Make sure to comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already and want to see more RWBY theories and RWBY content. So, with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video.